We're sitting here in the garden of Ponderosa, which is a place in Brandenburg, about 70 kilometers from Berlin, northeast. It's very close to the Polish border, which is the Oder River, which is the direction I'm looking at. And what you see in the background is the Speicher space, which was one of the first buildings that we occupied here and made studios here. In 2000, this place was found and founded, and we started with a studio here in the first summer of 2001. I remember being very disappointed. I remember taking at least 2 or 3 years as I came to Berlin to figure out where is my artistic family, where is my artistic home. And there were places. There was Stockelf, there was Tanzfabrik, there was Hebel am Ufer, and I saw work there, and I went a lot to see work, but it was very hard for me to find a place where I resonated. The interesting folks I found were in K77 studio in Kastanienallee, which is really a very small studio, very alternative, in a squatted house in the third yard, up like some shabby stairs. And I was really like, this is not why I came. I thought there would be more upscale studios where improvisational work or work that I was interested in would happen. The implication of really having the physicality of the body and working very much with this purely understanding of two bodies dancing together, and the physical dependency on each other and the ever-changing construction of the forces is a very simple proposition that has a very complex outcome. And this old idea that anybody can do it is still very valid to me, and that old idea that it's not gender biased, and the old idea that it's not body type biased is still very strong for me in this in understanding the form. The positive political consequence that was very needed at that time was an emancipation of the whole art form. So the emancipation of dance as an art form really came with the conceptual dance, and with the word, and with that people had something to say, and people had something to write about. It was maybe even more for the critics or the researchers important than for the choreographers. But the whole field really got expanded and got more serious, or got taken more serious. Like cool, straight. It was mostly straight men doing conceptual dance. People write about their practice, and they develop concepts for their practice. So I think it's really good to start to look into that there has been writing and conceptualizing going on from the body-based experience. The very first one was a really long state of observation. I was an observer, and because I had this job as a hairdresser, I could actually permit myself to not find work immediately. I wanted to keep creating work as an artist, but I was not sure where and how, and so I spent really these 3 years to look and to go everywhere and to see basically everything. And that at a certain moment was of course seen by people, and they started talking to me, and in a really growing way, I had good conversations with almost everybody that was involved in in the scene or in Berlin, and that resulted into being interested in the ZDB, in this Association for Contemporary Dance in Berlin, that I became a member right away. And I knew that there was a big change happening, and there was change possible in the development of that. And because, again, I'm someone who likes to be, maybe that's my strongest, is a certain kind of persistence. So I observed very long, and then I was a very long a member of ZDB, to the point that there were elections to the board, and people said you would be probably a good board member, and you've seen so much and you know so much, you know everybody, why don't you join? And that was actually quite important 4 years in the ZDB, because it was the time of Tanzplan, and it was the time of the formation of HZT, and because from the board we selected positions to who is doing what, and I was kind of from the association the person who would be associated with the HZT and with the development of HZT. And in between there was also, of course, that Barbara Friedrich had let go of Tanztage, and Inge Cox from Holland took over the festival. But because Inge was from Amsterdam, she wanted to talk to someone who could talk about the scene in Berlin, and so we had coffee and dinner times together, figuring out like who would be people to invite or who's doing what in which venue. And when she decided not to continue with Tanztage, it was in a way quite natural to hand over the position to me, and it was like, then I did Tanztage. January 2008 was my first Tanztage, and then 14 was my last, so I did seven years. That was, of course, also a very beautiful but very demanding position. And then in 2014, almost like the circle kind of went round, because I got funding to do my first bigger production in contemporary dance in Berlin, and as the Sophiensäle was my home for Tanztage, they were very happy to invite me as an artist, and from that really everything changed again, and I'm really, maybe after 15 years, where I actually started, or where I wanted to start in Berlin with being a funded choreographer in the city. On one hand, I do have a problem with power, a personal problem with power, or with power that is abused, or with power that is used to bring certain things forward and other things not. The necessity of articulating an artistic vision is, on the other hand, very relevant, and I always missed in Berlin the possibility of, let's say, Ludger having a production budget and can say, with this production budget I can support these 5 artists, and Wiebke and Kirsten from Doc Elf have a production budget, and they say, with this production budget I want to produce these 5 artists, and Sophiensäle, and as we go along, that curators can actually shape an artistic vision, because this for me is lacking so much in Berlin, that there's really no instances of like what is good quality or what is not so good quality. And then it's dodgy again, it's like very difficult to work on these themes, but still a city like Berlin could have different clusters of aesthetics if people would be forced to articulate that. Now, opposite to Tanztage, which I always felt I needed to present a certain overview of what's happening in Berlin, and even go to the small studios and see what's happening in a small studio in Kreuzberg or Moabit that somebody founded. I always try to have an overview of many different aesthetics. Like as a curator for Sophiensäle, which I did for 2 years, and I wouldn't even call it curator because it was an assistant to the artistic direction. It was really a very small position. It was very, very difficult because then again the city funding comes in, and you as somebody who decides, you talk with about, let's say, you talk with 50 people. You say, okay, with these 20 I want to continue working, and these 20 I support towards the city with their application, and then the city decides the 5 people out of that 20 that gets it. So the position of a curator is very dependent on the jury of the Senate, and then you're getting a bitter taste or a bitter feeling, because it's maybe not the 5 that you would prefer. Maybe the one position that you really, really want to have in there doesn't get funding, and then what do you do? But I think in Berlin it's really also possible. If you you don't have to go to Hau or Sophiensäle. You go to Tanzfabrik, you go to showings of Balance One, you go to Doc Elf. There's so many possibilities. You go to Halle. I think visibility is there. If you work with dance in Berlin, you are part of the scene. You're in that scene. That's it. It's so simple for me. And with all the consequences that there is, that you are seen, and you are seen by people who are in the scene too. And some people don't go and see work, and they're still part of the scene. Or there's people who say, I don't want to be part of the scene, but I think they are anyway, just by doing what they're doing in the place they're doing it. The politics of friendship is something that is so dear to me, but it's of course not with everybody. Like, the politics of friendship is a few people that are in my surrounding, that support me, that we have talks, and that's a tight-knitter situation. Or the contact community is there is a scene within a scene that are the people who do contact improvisation in Berlin, and this is again very diverse. There are artists, but then there's also therapeutes, and there's just normal people. When I come here in Ponderosa, that's definitely also a scene, and that's a scene that's very much built on community and living together and working together and cooking together, but also very much rooted in a certain vision of contemporary dance. And then of course in Berlin you always have this problem that nobody's there all the time. That's kind of the biggest problem. That sometimes you want to work with people, but they're not here, or sometimes you want to meet these people that are not here. I really talk to a lot of people about that love is part of the motor, that I need to be in love with the people I work with, that I need to be in love with the material, and that this very heartful affection to the people and to the work becomes one of the major motors in my work. And with this comes a certain work ethic, and with this comes a certain like to break the hierarchies down a little bit, but also it would be strange to not have the hierarchy. So a 50-year-old has more experience than a 25-year-old. So and this relationship with power, within the power relationships, how you use power and how you use this work ethics, I think this is one of the major things I would want to address also, because I do hear from a lot of dancers and a lot of choreographers that they're not treated well, and in this way I think we have also really to talk and really have to look into how we work, and whatever platform we find for that is good, but to talk about it, to say it. The teaching becomes so crucial. Like the teaching, how do you sustain a practice that actually invites heterogeneous situations? And that's oftentimes in the history of learning, that's not what we're doing. In the history of learning, we're wanting to make people the same. And it needs so much attention, it needs so much shift in the attitude, it needs so much also like revival of judgment. Look, not go for the first interesting thing, then you go for fashion, but really to have the possibility to understand why people do what is really important. There are these role models, but they're too little. There's not a lot of them. There should be 20 more in Berlin. And then you could talk about differences. But with a handful, it's so limited. And
Why there are so little?
because there's no company structure. There's no structure of support for bigger companies in Berlin. That's the one thing we should come back to. But the other thing, and I hear this maybe in some interview already also, that we keep making ourselves small. We keep thinking small, we keep thinking no money, we keep thinking no costume, we keep thinking text from the internet, we keep thinking self-made music, we keep thinking we don't have big visions, and there's no big visions because there is not many people with big vision. I was never ambitious. It just starts now. My ambition starts with 52. But on the other, I also keep thinking on persistence. Just do your work and don't listen too much what other people do. Do your work and find how important it is for you in the work. And then, success. I also don't. I mean, now it's easy for me to talk about it because I have it a little bit. But I was never really success driven. Thinking a little bit bigger and remembering Tanznacht Berlin, like in the early 2000 years, which whatever it was one night in the Akademie der Künste where everybody was there. And no matter how there were these short pieces that were interesting maybe for some people, but just the moment of having one night in the year or one night in 2 years where you just go and that you meet the scene if you want to. And that has changed. I don't see not everybody anymore because it's stretched over 4 days. The other thing was opening, then later in 2000, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, opening of Sommerbar. I had the feeling for Tanz im August in Podeville, that was something where everybody was there. That's not there anymore. So I really see the lack of these bigger, like just bigger events for contemporary dance. My wishes for the Berlin dance scene, and one of them is really the wish for a dance prize. Like we need a certain kind of recognition of contemporary dance in a certain kind of a price. Now, all the problematics that come with a price are problematics that can be solved, but just to honor the art form in one event every 2 years. There's this one quote that I use also in this other piece that of a Polish woman that is a painter, and she says that if one person's coming to my exhibition and sees one of the 1,000 that comes and sees a photo or a painting and changes something in their thinking, that's success. So in this way, yeah, keep performing, you reach a few people, small scale, big scale. Anyway, it's small scale. I mean, if you think of live performing, it's anyway small scale. If you're mixed word and you reach 600 or 1,000, it's not much really. So to put this into another relevance also maybe.